Hi, today we're going to talk about making PMax and Search work together. So I'm Brad Geddes, the co-founder of Adalysis, which is a PPC management tool that streamlines Google Ads and Microsoft Ads workflows. I've been in this industry for 25 years, and over the years, we've seen a lot of big shifts in how Google shows ads across accounts. And right now, that shift is really PMax and Search and shopping campaigns often compete with each other as opposed to complementing each other. So we're going to take a look at what's going on and really how to solve this for your accounts. So step one is this thing called priority. Google loves the word priority, which really is just what order influences how Google's going to display the ads themselves. So for instance, if someone does a search, right, and that search term is identical to an exact match keyword, then that gets priority one, should show most of the time. If that keyword is not identical and an exact match to the search term, then Google moves to step two. And they say, do you have a phrase or broad match words that's identical to that search term? And that gets priority two. Now, if you also have a search theme from PMax that's identical to search term, it also gets priority two. So at this point in time, PMax and Search can compete. If none of those exist, then Google moves to relevance, right? Google gives priority to what they feel is more relevant. And if they don't have what they consider a great relevant offer, then they move to ad rank. So in reality, if you don't have an exact phrase or broad match keyword that's identical to the search term, then it's up in the air what campaign can show an ad. And when we say the word identical, we mean identical. So if you have this search term, Italy tour guide, right, and you have the search keyword, Italy tour guide, that's identical. But let's say we have this search term, Italian tour guide, not identical. Italy tour guides, plural, not identical. Italy guided tours, not identical. So you may have a huge list of search terms which match an exact match keyword or phrase or broad match. But if that search term is not the exact same as your search keyword in any match type, it's not identical from a priority order standpoint. Where this gets kind of messy is even when we get into brand exclusions. So this brand that I'm using real examples from is not Papa John's, but their brand lays out the exact same. And so they have the exact match keywords in search, right? Papa John's pizza. They have the brand exclusions in PMax, Papa John's pizza. Their PMax search terms include Papa John's, one word, Papa John's singular, Papa John's pizzas, plural, and all these variations. So even when you look at brand exclusions and how things work, identical really needs to be identical to have control. So what happens in many cases, right, is we have this search term and it appears from search sometimes. Question is, does it also appear from PMax? And if it does, what campaign's doing best? So we really want to examine the overlap between search and PMax. Now, we're a PPC management tool. We have thousands of accounts in our system. And we wanted to develop a methodology for this test that would be fair to all the stats we're publishing. So first, we only wanted to look at PMax campaigns that did not have a feed, because product impressions can pollute this data since you can't segment product impressions versus search impressions in PMax. We also wanted anything that was low volume and had very few clicks or very few impressions to not be included, because a one-click, one impression, or even a four-click, 10 impressions is such a high percentage of CTR on 10 impressions that skews data too much. And when we got rid of all these different PMax campaigns and so forth, we had about 2,000 accounts that had one or more PMax campaigns that fit this criteria that we used. So question one we wanted to know is if Google has a priority order, right? The search term is identical to a keyword. How often does PMax show for that search term? And it's not too bad. right? Only in 2.8% of all the campaigns did PMax have impressions when there's a search term that's identical as the keyword. Okay, it looks pretty good at first. They're following the rules. Now, there was a lot of 0% instances where no one had any overlap. Now, if we get rid of the 0%, and 8.7% PMax had impressions for terms. Still not a lot, but the range of overlap was 0 to 100%. I don't think I've ever seen this range in a study I've done in Google before, meaning some accounts, there was 0 search terms from PMax that were also keywords in search campaigns. In other campaigns, 100% every single search term from PMax was a keyword from search. So what you really want to know for yourself is, what's my overlap? Does this matter for me? But from a keyword standpoint, it seems pretty decent. Now, these are very strict rules. The search term is identical to the keyword for search to show. But if it's not identical, right, you have a keyword that's just a little bit different than the search term. Now, for those search terms, which campaigns are showing, right? That's the bigger question when we want to get into this. So if we look at all PMax search terms, right, across 2,000 accounts, 45% of every single PMax search term were also search terms in a search campaign, right? So essentially, almost half of every search term in PMax is also a search term in search. So for most of your search terms, right, you don't have the identical keyword. So the question is, if we don't have this actual keyword, what campaign shows? Seems about half the time it could be either campaign could show. Now, okay, so we know there's a lot of overlap here, right? PMax and search both show a significant number of times for the same search terms. So the question is then, if we don't have identical keyword, then that means the more relevant, right, that's our priority 3, or the higher ad rank, priority 4, would show more often. So we wanted to know who does show more often for these search terms. So 45% of your search terms come from both. Of those 45% that come from both, PMax has more impressions 61% of the time. So essentially, right, what Google's almost saying is that PMax is more relevant, or it has a better ad rank than search, because our priority 3 and 4, right, are relevance and ad rank. And so for your 45% of all PMax search terms that also come from search, they get more impressions when they come from PMax than from search. So then if we say, okay, if PMax shows more often, I mean, obviously quite a bit more often, and it's a relevance or an ad rank thing, then what's the metric differences for these search terms? If it comes from both, is PMax the better click-through rate, conversion rate, so forth. So for those search terms that come from both campaigns, search has a better click-through rate 65% of the time. So it's definitely not CTR, which is often directly correlated to relevance, is why PMax shows more often, right? But this click-through rate for search for the same search terms is better than PMax for most of your search terms. Okay, well, maybe PMax has better conversion rates. So when the same search term is from search and PMax, search campaigns have higher conversion rates 84% of the time. So PMax has more impressions, search has better click-through rates, and better conversion rates. Now, unfortunately, Google doesn't give us revenue cost data by PMax search term. So we can't actually figure out the ROAS differences between search and PMax. But what we do know is PMax shows for 61% of the impressions, but search has 86% more often higher conversion values than PMax. So PMax shows more, but search still has higher conversion values, which would indicate search has a significantly higher ROAS than PMax. So for the same search terms, PMax is shown more often, but has lower click-through rates, lower conversion rates, lower conversion values. What is going on, and kind of how do you fix this, right? That's one of those things we want to sort of merge old school control with new school automation. So the number one issue is poor organization leading to poor relevance and ad rank. And this is part of the responsive search ad story that's very poor for a lot of marketers. So the story kind of goes, from Google's standpoint, give us your keywords, give us some RSA assets, and we'll mix and match these together to serve great ads for you. You don't need to take all this work in organization. So this is a hotel based in New York, and they really specialize in being pet-friendly, dog-friendly, so forth. So they have this one ad group, New York City dog-friendly hotel, downtown New York City hotel, and so forth. They have an asset, right, in their responsive search ad that matches their keywords, dog-friendly hotel, downtown New York City hotel, and so forth. And so their expectation is if someone searches New York City dog-friendly hotel, then their RSA asset, so their ad would say dog-friendly hotel. In reality, if we look at their keyword impressions, their by far number one impression is NYC dog-friendly hotel, served 19,000 times. The corresponding RSA asset has been served 4. Most times when someone searches New York City dog-friendly hotel, they do not see an ad that mentions dog or pet friendliness. They usually see an ad that says downtown New York City hotel or Times Square hotel. So that's a mix match. And this is a big issue in a lot of accounts. So they did what most people would do in this instance. They reorganized their ad groups. And so they went through their search terms. They added search terms to more specific ad groups. They wrote ads that were related to those search terms. And after reorganizing, they had its 20-ish ad groups. They tripled their conversions for the same budget. Right? And this is just evergreen organization that is always important, is that good ad group organization, because it helps relevance both from a quality score standpoint and from a click-through rate conversion rate standpoint, and from making sure that if you have a keyword that really matches those search terms, search shows over PMax and search has better click-through rates and conversion rates. Now, second problem, again, sort of Google's fault in a way when they say, just give us your keywords. Hopefully they're broad matched from Google's perspective, not from ours. And we'll figure out the search terms. Turn on CPA bidding, max conversion value, turn on whatever automated bidding, and we'll just do this. You don't have to go through the exercise of adding search terms. But if you don't add your top search terms as keywords, then the keyword is not in your account, which means the search term can't be identical to the keyword, which means PMax can often show over search. So you still want to go through that exercise of saying, here's our top search terms. We should make them keywords in our search campaigns. Problem 3, Google recommendations. Google recommends removing redundant keywords. So if they look at your account, they say, these 8 keywords are basically all the same thing. Again, we could say like Italy tour guides, Italy guided tour, tours of Italy. Google's like, hey, these are all the same thing. Remove all the extras. If you remove the extras, you don't have the identical keyword in your account, which means PMax shows over search. Now, maybe you don't follow Google recommendations. Do you have Google auto apply settings turned on? So if you don't know the auto apply settings, go into your Google Ads account, go to recommendations, click on the auto apply option, and see what Google can automatically change on your behalf. 2 of the options: remove redundant keywords, same problem as before, or remove non-serving keywords with very few or no impressions. Now, removing non-serving keywords is often not that big of a deal for a lot of people unless you have seasonality to your business, right? We'll see a lot of time, maybe in the summer, someone's a roofing company, but in the winter, they don't want to work on roofs, especially in the north, so they're basement companies. And they have just completely different impressions by time of year. Maybe you sell flowers, right? Post Mother's Day, Valentine's and Mother's Day flower delivery drops significantly in impressions. So if you have non-serving keywords automatically turned on, Google removes those keywords, the next season hits, those keywords aren't in your account, so PMax can show, or maybe nothing shows because those keywords are now gone. The ad preview tool, another good way of getting insights. Now, I've seen a lot more often in the past 6 months or so, Google saying, we don't know why your ads aren't showing for this search. And it seems like it might be related to PMax, where Google is looking at this preview tool to show you responsive search ads. And since RSAs aren't showing in the preview, PMax is showing. Instead, the tool seems to think we don't know why your ads aren't showing. And this has become such a common issue that you're like, Google really doesn't understand why ads aren't serving anymore, or PMax isn't coded into this, and that's really the problem. But then what happens if it's not, hey, we don't know? You'll often see this keyword's not triggering because another keyword's identical. Oh, identical, great. And then that identical keyword has a low ad rank, which means it's not eligible to be displayed. So then another ad shows. So we often want to kind of think about our impression shares and bids when ad rank comes into play. So this account has a search campaign and then a corresponding PMax for that search, then a different search campaign and then corresponding PMax to that search. So that way they have this sells in this region or this sells these products, and they have them all complement each other. But then if you have lost impression share budget, then the search campaign can't show. Since it can't show, then PMax could show instead. So if you're using search and PMax sort of together, you want to make sure your search campaigns have very low loss impression share due to budget, because otherwise that budget just flows into PMax or flows to a different campaign type. And then if you have loss impression share rank, either A, you can remove some targeting types because maybe you just have too many keywords in your account, and that would lower that number, right? Assuming you're still spending your budget. Number two, if you have a low impression share rank, then you would need to raise bids or raise quality score to recapture that. Now, if you have high quality scores and it's only raising bids, you don't want to raise them past when you make money, right? But we have to think about lost impression share rank because this is the CPC, the bid, submitted to the auction. So if PMax for some reason can submit higher bids to the auction, impression share doesn't count, which we'll get into in a second. But that also can cause a mismatch in how PMax and search goes together. So for instance, in this account, right, we have search PMax. Our search is manual CPC. Our PMax is max conversion value. They use different bid strategies to determine the bid to submit it to the auction. So of course, they're going to have different ad ranks. The second one is target ROAS and max conversion value. Again, different bid strategies. And what we see a lot is someone has a search and PMax campaign and search is doing really well. So they know search is doing great. So maybe they submit, hey, we want a $15 CPA from search because you can get it for us. They know PMax doesn't convert quite as well. So maybe they'll set PMax, say, you go for $25, right? Because they're not holding it to quite the stringent requirements of search. Except if PMax now has a higher target CPA, it can submit a higher bid into the auction than search, which means PMax wins on ad rank. So a lot of the reasons PMax trumps search at times is actually almost like a self-inflicted wound where the advertiser has different bid strategies or campaign setting issues. So next thing to think about, if you have both search and PMax, do they target the same regions? We'll see companies like, we don't ship to Alaska and Hawaii, or we have regulations, we don't target California and so forth. And their search campaigns have very specific excluded regions. And then PMax would be like the whole country or the whole world and is using different location targeting options. Well, of course, PMax can show for some region in this case, they target different regions. Same with ad scheduling. So these are great features to use, right? Locations on scheduling, but they should be consistent in search versus PMax, Or if anything, PMax should be more restricted than search, not more expansive than search. Problem 8, misspellings aren't identical. So, Jenny, who does a whole lot of chatting with the industry on how things going, had made an article that, right now, Google wants to show more search term data because the other category is really huge. So they're going to group all the misspellings together with the proper spelling and show you this data. Now, sounds great from a reporting standpoint, except you can no longer tell what's a misspelling in Google. You have no clue. And when you see companies, when they first launch Airbnb, Lyft, and we could go on and on that are slightly misspelled, well, they're technically misspelling for a while before Google understands they're a brand, an actual word. So A, you can't see those stats anymore. B, we don't know how things are being corrected. So if someone misspells something, is it misspelling corrected first, then Google goes through priority order? Or does someone misspell something, Google says, here's the priority order. Oh, misspelling is not identical search term. But when we get to stats, we're going to spell correct and put it in there. We did a study post these changes. So misspelling seem to be a real problem right now of not knowing what's being misspelled, what Google is showing us for that they're just spell correcting, because we've seen some crazy spell corrections from Google, and show those. So that is an important part of this is we've seen a lot of companies going back to management techniques from 2010, 2012 of even earlier, adding lots of exact match misspellings. I hope we don't have to go there because that's a crazy amount of work. It's a large number of keywords. But because PMax seems to show so much from misspellings, Papa John's one word is no longer the correct spelling. PMax shows over search. That hopefully is not something that we need to start doing, but it's something that you might start watching more than you ever did before. Now, everyone needs a good conspiracy answer. So another possible reason PMax is showing so much is Jerry Dreschler, who was the head of Google Ads for years, stepped down a few months ago. NVIDIA took his place. One of the things she was in charge of was launching Performance Max. So from a career standpoint, if Google can tell Wall Street, hey, PMax is making so much money, it's great, it looks good on her resume, which means maybe she's eligible for more promotions within Google. And you could see politics being the reason PMax shows over search, if you like some sort of fun answers to go down to. Now, the other issue to just note with this is when PMax shows over search, search wasn't eligible because PMax showed instead. So search doesn't record impression shares. So for instance, if you are a brand and you watch your impression share data and you want, hey, we want to make sure we're 95% on our brand, or we have some really important terms. We want to be 80% impression share on these important terms. Every time PMax shows for your brand, right, that impression did not count to search. So you can have 100% impression share on any keyword in search and actually not show that often or show PMax has more impressions than search does. So impression share data is really ugly right now because it's only when it was eligible. So all impressions that come from a different campaign type don't count in impression share data. So if this is something you report on a lot, you might need to really take note of those impressions for those search terms in PMax because they're not counting in your search impression share data anymore. All right, so we listed a lot of problems. So let's fix this. It's not that hard to fix, luckily. It's actually some pretty simple steps, right? So number one, take your search term data, take your PMax search term data, put in a pivot table and look for overlaps. It's real simple, right? If you have your search terms in search and the same impressions in PMax is a really low number, hey, maybe it's not a problem. If it's huge, there's something to do. But step one is just how big is it for you? Now, across 2,000 accounts, 45% of all PMax impressions were from search. So odds are there's something to do if you run PMax at all. So what we want to do is say, okay, what are our top search terms? Doesn't matter if they're from search campaigns or PMax campaigns. What are our best search terms? Let's make sure those are in our search ad groups because we want them to show from search. And it makes sense. Search has better click-through rates and conversion rates. When you build an ad group in search, you're thinking about the search term matches my keyword with the relevant ad and relevant landing page, right? It's a very cohesive item. Where PMax, you're like, okay, let's make an ad for a huge amount of search terms and potentially products or other things. It can show across multiple properties, even in apps. And we pick landing pages for that. That could be pretty general. Or maybe we use URL expansion. But search is going to be better on purpose for the same search terms than PMax, right? So it's logical. This way, it works this way. So we want to say, what are our top search terms from anywhere? You really make sure they're in search campaigns with relevant ads and landing pages. Third, check your settings, your bid settings, your location settings, your time of day settings, your budget settings. Consistency is what we're looking for, right? So make sure that if you have search and PMax campaigns to work together properly, they must use these same settings, or maybe PMax is a little more restricted. It may be in conversion types or something else. But search should at least include everything PMax can show for. Some exceptions there if you do retail, right? So we've been talking about how this works purely with non-feeds for a reason, so it can't skew our data, right? But if you're using retail, you're using PMax for retail, of course you're going to have overlap because the same search term could show a search ad from search and a product ad from PMax. Or PMax could show both the search ad and the product ad. It could be any combination. And we can't segment this from Google. The reporting is really messy. So you still want to go through and say, what are my top search terms? Are they in search? But you wouldn't want to necessarily make negative campaign or account level keywords to stop PMax from doing things. So if you're downloading a lot of PMax search term data, it can be tedious, and doing some overlap analysis can be a little daunting at times. You have a large account. So one thing Adalysis does really well is we'll look and say, here's your PMax search terms. Is this a keyword in search? Is it a search term in search, right? Is it a search term in shopping campaigns? If you want to get more details, we can say, oh, we have no conversions here off of 4,200 impressions. What does this look like from search? Well, search has less impressions and more conversions for that same term, but it's come from 5 ad groups. Maybe we want to organize this some, but that's that overlap, right? So just seeing, do you have a problem in adding them as keywords, viewing overlap percentages, making negative keywords? Simple to do in our system. And supposedly Google will add campaign level negative keywords for PMax this year. As soon as that happens, that'll be baked into the workflow because we're a workflow system to make life easier. So that'll make it much simpler and much more efficient to manage overlaps and ensure search shows for search. And PMax often shows other places. So in a way, it feels like dynamic search ads from a few years ago. Search is our primary. Someone searched because they want to know the answer to a question. And we say, we understand this. Here's the ad. Here's the landing page. This is what you need to know. PMax is almost that backfill of, it can be our remarketing. It can serve across channels. It can do a whole lot of, filling in the gaps for us, but it's not primary. So when you think about this, PMax and search campaigns have a lot of overlap. When they have overlap for search terms, PMax usually has more impressions, but search has better conversions, conversion rates, and ROAS value. So you want to know, do I have a problem? Right? Where is the problem? Then we want to fix the problem by saying it's not a hard fix, right? Let's make our top search terms actual keywords in search with relevant ad groups, with proper campaign settings to ensure that when someone does that search, we have the best chance of a conversion with search campaigns. Now, if they're also then later looking across display networks or apps, that's when PMax can say, okay, I'm not in search so much anymore, but I still know these users, and I can reach back out to them and bring them back in for more conversions. So if you need more help on your account, we offer free audits. You can link your account, get an instant free audit. Here's what you need to do. We're a software company built by marketers for marketers to really streamline workflow from budget management to KPI to here's what just needs to get done to make your life faster and easier. So thank you, and we'll see you at the next SMX.
Hey, Leslie is muted, so I will step in here for a second. So it's always fun when we get new technology going and everything else. It's always a great time. So thanks everyone for joining us for Q&A. And we are going to hop into some questions. Are you back here, Leslie?
I don't know. I changed my mic. Is it working now?
You are here
I
now.
am. I am
Thanks for
live.
joining
All
us.
right. Sorry about that. So, Brad, thank you for pinch hitting for me, and really appreciate you making the time to join us for some live Q&A on that terrific session. So, thank you. So I'm going to jump in because we already have a ton of questions from folks that have been joining us here for your session. And the first question comes from Andrea. Andrea asks, I need help understanding the brand exclusion piece of the puzzle. Could Brad go into that both in setup and best practices for use?
Hey, Andrea, good to see you again. We'll kind of see you. So, if you put brand exclusions in PMax, then PMax won't show for that search term, right? That's it's pretty straightforward. But what we're seeing is that misspellings or variations don't count on that exclusion. So if you're, Nike and you put in Nike as a brand exclusion, you won't show for when someone searches Nike, but you will show if they search, Nike shoes or and so forth. So you often need to add multiple brand exclusions depending on how many variations of your brand exist. I mean, that's really what it gets into is what are all the search terms you don't want to show for? Add all those as brand exclusions. I hope this is something that Google could expand this a bit for us and make life much easier for marketers by you letting us use some sort of expanded brand exclusion options.
Thanks, Brad. And Andrea, if you have a follow-up question, feel free to post it. The next question comes from Caitlin, and Caitlin asks, do you have data for those bar charts that compares CPCs for these same search terms between search and PMax?
I wish we did. Oh, Google won't let you see CPCs by search term for PMax terms. So, which is why we're sort of guessing on the ROAS things a little bit. And it's an educated guess, but it's a guess. If Google ever gives us CPCs, we'll definitely get in and look at that too.
Thanks, Brad. Our next question comes from Jacob. And Jacob asks, will PMax and search campaigns show at same time, or do you have something set up to prevent overlap?
So, PMax and search, if PMax does not have a feed, meaning PMax is showing on search, ad slots or display apps, etc., then they can't show at the same time. PMax shows or search shows in a search ad spot. If you have a feed attached to PMax, then you could have your search ad show in search, PMax show in the product listings, or PMax could show both. But they will never both show simultaneously in the search ad slots.
Got it. Thanks, Brad. Next question is from Matt. And Matt asks, if you use brand exclusion for PMax campaigns, why does it still show for brand terms? Thanks.
Yeah, so Matt, this seems to be related to the search terms not being identical to your brand exclusions. That's really what seems to be going on here. And Google's done. Then they keep doing work with how spell correction works, and so hopefully we'll get to a point where Google spell corrects first, then looks to see, do I have a brand exclusion? Do I have a negative keyword, etc. They don't seem to do that yet. And hopefully eventually we'll also be able to report on what's the misspelling so we can see how to manage those properly as well.
Great. Next question comes from Katie. Katie asks, what do you do in the instance where some settings aren't changeable in PMax while they are in search? She refers to device bid modifiers.
Yeah, so essentially you're in a situation, it sounds like, where search is not showing on mobile phones, but PMax, of course, can still show on phones because you can't remove yourself from inventory types of PMax. In that case, I mean, either A, you put search on phones, or B, you live with it. But there's not much you can do to fix that right now with the limitations of PMax.
Got it. Thanks, Brad. The next question is another question from Caitlin. Caitlin's follow-up question: do you have any theories on data on how this overlap is impacting CPCs on search? We know CPCs have been on the rise this year for all advertisers and have become very notable on brand campaigns. Do you think the overlap between these campaign type is a contributing factor?
So, Caitlin, that's a very convoluted answer to your question, right? I mean, there's so many ways to sort of think through this, but in the end, your account submits one bid to the auction. So if you don't have the keyword and you're not the most relevant, which again, relevance is a tough one, Google defaults to ad rank, right? Which now when they compare PMax and shopping, they default to ad rank. So whenever you get to where ad rank is the tiebreaker factor, right? It's CPC and quality score. And assuming your quality scores are similar, right? A higher CPC wins. So is it possible this contributes to higher CPCs? Yes. But if you're adding, most of your keywords as exact match, or you have your actual search terms as keywords, they should compete less and have less of a contributing factor. But then the second step is you submit a bid, but then so does everybody else, right? So if you fix it in your account, but no one else does, you're still going to have that same auction pressure pushing up CPCs. So is it probably some way contributing? Absolutely. Is this something you can fix for yourself? Kind of. Can you fix it for everyone in the auction? Absolutely not. So it's going to just still be lingering around as as Google has these multi-channel types of campaigns, such as PMax happening.
All right, next question coming in from Dixon. Dixon asks, is it safe to assume that if your ROAS targets are lower than your ROAS targets in your PMax campaigns, assuming they, because convoluted, I'm not reading this very well, I'm going to start again. Is it safe to assume that if your ROAS targets are lower than your ROAS targets in your PMax campaigns, assuming they are both on maximum conversion value, does that mean you are favoring your PMax campaign to show ads on the same keywords?
Yeah. Okay. So just to make sure everyone's clear on this question, right? Essentially, if we have search set at 100% break-even ROAS, and we have PMax set at 50%, just give me more conversions, even lose money ROAS. At that point in time, search is going to probably submit a higher bid to the auction because it's got a higher ROAS target, right? If they're both equal at 100%, then the bid should be similar-ish. Now, I say it that way because Google still has to go through the math of saying, if I submit this to the auction, what's the likelihood of conversion, the likelihood of et cetera, right? So they take, conversion rates, et cetera, into account. If PMax is set at 200% and search is set at 100%, right? At this point in time, PMax is often going to submit a higher bid. So having similar bids is a good idea across the two. Now, that's for non-feeds. Let's go and say you're a retail company and your product ads convert better than your search ads do, right? Well, in that case, you're going to have higher targets in PMax it's going to have better conversion values because it's showing your product ads as well. And this is the sort of trickiest part, is if you're a retail company, do you make a PMax campaign that is not using, other assets, is only showing the feed, right? And then you manage search. Or do you make it so PMax can show everywhere? So you can run feed only PMax campaigns. And that also helps retail kind of serve each one individually, as well, to stop some of those overlaps. But in the end, if you're heavily retail and you're setting your bids for your product ads, because that's what you really live by, then you're just going to accept some overlap in life, right? Then that's okay. That's just going to happen. There's going to be some bleed through, but that's where you make your money. You need to focus more there anyway. So, always think about what your goal is as you're making these decisions, right? Complete control with less revenue doesn't help you out. So there's something to be said of, letting things sort of not work perfectly.
Thanks, Brad. Next question comes in from Jake. And Jake asks, what is the best way to see search terms from PMax? Third-party tool?
Jake, I did not pay Jake for this question, but I mean, our tool. So if you have a single PMax campaign and you have 200 search terms, you can go into Google and download your PMax search terms, and it'll take you a couple minutes. If you have multiple PMax campaigns and thousands of search terms, it was months ago, but I did an experiment of trying to download this for someone who had 6 PMax campaigns and probably 20,000, 30,000 search terms. I don't remember the number. It was a couple hours to download, right? Where search is instant. Adalysis does this all for you. We download last month. We sorted, segmented everything. So if you're looking for a third-party tool to get into PMax search term management, we offer a 2-week free trial. I'd say try us first, because this is something we've thought about a lot in how marketers need to work on this.
Thanks, Brad. And I'm laughing at the next question. So Brent asks, I'm living a PMax free life right now. Am I living life right, Brad? How long do you think I can keep living this way?
You know what, Brent? So we've also seen a lot of companies who had adopted PMax in one way or another who were not retail. I want to make that caveat, they're not retail. And if you're not using PMax at all, you're probably not retail. Who have since left it and have gone back to running dedicated search and dedicated display campaigns. And display campaigns have so many targeting options, so many ways of playing things. You do not need to live in a PMax world right now. And even if you're a retail company, we recently had an advertiser, and they spend $300,000-$400,000 a month, who ditched all their PMax to go back to standard shopping campaigns, due to how PMax was causing problems. So PMax is useful if you have small accounts and you just can't manage all the product feeds. It is nice in that it can serve as your remarketing ads without having to make all the lists and things, especially if you're a smaller account and you actually don't meet some of the size requirements. For others, it's often worth testing. I've seen sometimes PMax does incredibly well for no good reason. Sometimes it wastes a whole lot of money, but don't also be afraid to test it while you are changing what conversions it can work by. So for instance, we have some companies they're e-commerce, but they have physical storefronts. And they prefer standard shop in a PMax, but they kind of like PMax's automation. So their conversion goals in PMax are in-store visits. That's it. So they say, PMax, go wild, go crazy, but you're only managing to in-store visits. And then we'll manage everything else. So you can also do some fun things of playing what conversions it works with to make sure it's not maybe working from everything, your form fills and whatnot, which may get a lot of spam at times, but it's got some very solid or constrained conversion data to work with. And it's eventually maybe we'll all need to use it, but I think we're still multiple years from that still. So if you don't want to try it, Brent, there's no need to do it right now.
Okay, we're moving on. Moving on to John, who asked the question, assume a client has 5,000 monthly budget and they are in B2B. Do you have a rule or guidance for when to start testing PMAC after search?
So if they've got a $5,000 monthly budget and you have a solid keyword list in search and your lost impression share budget is 0%, meaning you're spending you're spending everything you can right now and you have budget left over, right? You can't spend your entire budget. And maybe give PMax a try. If you have $5,000 a month to spend and your lost impression share budget's 20-30%, meaning you can't spend all your budget right now, don't try PMax, stick to search. So until you've exhausted what you can really spend on your top terms in search, there's no need for B2B to touch PMax at the moment. In fact, demand gen might be your next step to even try at times on the B2B side. Demand gen's it's getting better. It's not great yet, but that's going to be probably a better lead capacity in the end than PMax for B2B. Don't quote me, and they're not quite there yet, so don't just throw your money in demand gen and walk away. That's also a big mistake. But you can test demand gen a little bit and PMax, see what works best in your B2B clients.
Thank you, Brad. Next question. Should we still make dedicated remarketing campaigns if we're using PMax?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So if you can make 10, 20, 30 different audiences you're really targeting, you're a larger company, or even a mid-sized company, then display your marketing is fantastic in how you can target things. So yes, if you're a smaller company, you don't have a huge amount of data, you have issues with remarketing because you're in legal or healthcare or something. PMax gets around those rules because you're not using first party data for some of these things. So uh, let PMax do the remarketing. But as soon as you have a company where you have a brand manager, legal reviews things, and you're thinking through, I have audience A that I want to serve ads to this way. Audience B, we want them to take this step into the funnel from what they've done previously. Audience C is coordinated with this. We're trying to do these different tactics. Display has too much control and options to also run this through PMax. You really want to do that display dedicated at that point in time.
Thanks, Brad. We have time for one more question. The question is, are you saying that we should mine our PMax campaigns for new keywords?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. This feels like dynamic search ads from 10 years ago when DSAs were good backfill. If something's converting well, right, in PMax, then it's probably going to convert well in search, except with search, you can make sure you have the right ad and landing page that are really dedicated to that search term. So it's a great place to mine for new keywords.
Terrific. Thank you, Brad. As usual, an extremely valuable resource. Thank you for joining us at SMX Next and for providing such detailed information for our audience. And thanks to everyone who's joined today. Much appreciated. Enjoy the rest of the show.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Click the agenda link at the top of your screen to choose your next session.